Sound check 1 2 3. Sound check 1 2 3.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Light Rail Transit Subcommittee meeting for December 12th, 2025. We do have quorum present and I'd like to call the meeting of the LRT Subcommittee to order. Reminder that all electronic devices to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. I will ask before moving any further and clarifying who is in the room and who is not in the room, to just take a moment. This is the first meeting in chambers since the tragic accident that occurred in Ward 3 at Wilson and Emerald yesterday. I know it's been on the minds and hearts of a lot of, if not all, Hamiltonians. So I wanted to just take a moment, since it was a child, to request everybody in attendance take a moment of silence. You could stand, yeah, if you feel comfortable. Thank you. Joining me in council chambers today in terms of committee members that have voting status is Councillor Wilson, Councillor Huang, and Councillor Kassar. Joining me virtually, Councillor Francis and Councillor Kretsch. Non-voting members, and we have some new ones to welcome, so I'm going to start with our newbies. We have joining us for their very first LRT subcommittee meeting as non-voting advisors are Sarah Saudi. We have Caitlin Craven. Virtually, we have, I thought I saw Tom Cooper, but yeah, Tom Cooper's joining us virtually. And I think that covers our new advisory members. And longer standing non-voting advisory members we have joining us virtually, Sarah Mayo, we have Susie Braithwaite, and we have Emily Walsh, all joining virtually. And in chambers, we have Amanda Stringer, Dina Omazik, and we have Carl Andrus. Did I miss anybody? Oh, thank you. Brenda Wilson is also joining us virtually. Thank you. And Lee Stats. Thank you. All right. Lee, you're one of our new non-voting advisors. Welcome to your first LRT advisory subcommittee meeting. Approval of the agenda. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve the agenda as is presented? Moved by Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Kassar. Thank you both. That is a show of hand vote. All those in favor? Thank you, and that carries. On to our next item, which is declarations of interest. Committee members, do we have any to declare that are either disqualifying or non-disqualifying? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the minutes of our previous meeting from October 16th. So if I could have folks that were in the room that day to move. Thank you, Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Kretsch. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, that's also a hand vote to receive the minutes. Thank you. Any opposed? Carries. On to items for information. First up, we have 7.
Madam Chair, there's actually a delegation, and I did not put it in the roadmap. It is from Pierre Roy. My
There's
apologies.
nothing in my, no wonder.
There's nothing in your roadmap, no.
Awesome. I mean, I'm always down for a surprise at the last LRT subcommittee meeting of the year. First up, item 6 is delegations. This is previously approved, therefore doesn't need to be approved. We're just going straight in. Okay, Pierre Roy is our delegate for today. And Pierre, when you get to the microphone, you have 5 minutes in total. At the 4-minute mark, you'll hear a ding. That is a warning for you that you have a minute remaining. When you're ready, we'll begin the clock. And please I don't have it in front of me, do introduce what you're going to be speaking to.
For sure.
Thank you.
I'm speaking to the item on the agenda for municipal betterments and some other engagement opportunities. So good afternoon, members of the LRT subcommittee, council, staff, and the public. I understand that today we also have representatives from Metrolinx in the room for the first time, so I want to extend a warm welcome to them as well. Many of you have heard from me before, but to those who are new, my name is Pierre Roy. I'm a resident of Ward 3, and I live directly on the King Street corridor. I'm a huge proponent of the LRT, having seen the transformational effect it had in Kitchener-Waterloo. I'll start today by speaking to the Municipal Betterments report from the LRT office, and then discuss some opportunities for Metrolinx to expand its engagement opportunities and efforts with residents. I'd like to thank the LRT office staff for advancing their work on betterments since their initial presentation in April. The preliminary list presented in Appendix A contains a comprehensive commentary on the nature of each betterment under consideration and helpful insight into the discussion between the city and Metrolinx. I appreciate the forward-looking nature of many of these city infrastructure betterments, such as event power hookups, communications ducts, and connections for real-time HSR bus displays. Many others are welcome quality of life upgrades, such as enhancements to public realm and downtown areas, water bottle fill stations, public Wi-Fi, shade structures, and public art installations. I understand that a betterment evaluation tool was also included in the last discussion in April. I'd like to see the results of that exercise shared with the public so that we can understand the full breadth of the betterments considered and how they meet our evaluation criteria, and also to understand which betterments may have been out of scope for one reason or another. Despite the helpful staff report, I'm still trying to figure out where the betterments fit into the bigger picture. As is put in the report, betterments are enhancements or additions to the base scope of the Hamilton LRT project. The problem is, I don't really know what the base scope is. It doesn't seem like there's any public-facing documents that are reflective of both Metrolinx and the city's vision or base design for the project. How can I, as a resident with professional experience in that industry, provide my insights when I'm not provided with the full picture? I have comprehensively reviewed the conceptual design update that was shared to the public in the spring, and in all honesty, it raised more concerns than anything else. The lack of scale, line weighting, and detail made it impossible to critically examine the proposal. In many areas, dramatic changes have been made to the alignment and the road design that seem contradictory to our goals of a transit-oriented corridor. This is particularly obvious east of Sherman Avenue in my area of Ward 3. The road starts to get wider, there are more medians and fewer active transportation facilities. The public realm looks reduced from what it is even today, with narrow sidewalks pushed up against traffic lanes. Valuable corridor lands are even being used for urban rail yards and short road segments, which are only shown in this section of the corridor and essentially loop-back roads for neighborhood streets. We even see the reintroduction of two-lane, one-way segments of King Street, which the city had already determined should be converted to two-way back in our 2017 plan. Our world, and indeed our city, have changed a lot since our last environmental project report addendum, or EPR, was approved back in 2017. And so too has the LRT alignment, without any clear public-facing comprehensive analysis or justification as to why these changes were necessary. I watch from my front porch as blocks of homes, businesses, and apartments are torn down without any clear answer as to what will take their place. Residents and stakeholders are left in the dark as the project advances to the first stage of procurement. I'm told there's still time to be involved, that the first contract is only for utility and civil works. But how can you know where the utilities are going without first knowing generally where the LRT is going to go? In some areas, full blocks have been leveled for road widenings, while in others, a few select buildings remain. Why? The 2017 EPR addendum was undertaken to address a handful of project changes, including the extension to Eastgate, transit hubs at each terminus, and the new OMSF, among a few others. To facilitate approval of these changes, the team engaged in a robust year-long public engagement campaign, which included hosting 10 public information sessions and 75 stakeholder meetings focused on the new alignment. This was all necessary to fulfill the legislative requirements for consultation under OREG 23108 Transit and Rail Assessment Process. Given the robust engagement process we saw for our last EPR addendum, which addressed fewer project changes than we see in our current conceptual design, my question to Metrolinx today is, when can we expect the engagement process to begin? Despite fringe comments against the LRT, Hamilton is excited for this project. We believe in the opportunity for growth and sustainable mobility that it will bring. But I think to some extent, people are still skeptical that it's actually happening because they haven't seen much on the ground or much talk about what's to come. I believe Hamiltonians deserve a clear and transparent insight into the design process so that we, like you, can understand how the current design came to be. And I believe the feedback you will receive throughout this process will positively influence the project so that we can deliver the best possible outcome for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. Committee members, any questions for our delegate? First up, we have Member Andrus.
Hello, yes. Thank you so much for your presentation. I very much appreciate it. What would you like to see in terms of community engagement? From the HCBN's perspective, the only community engagement that's been done is by our organization back in 2023. So I'd love to know what you'd like to see from both Metrolinx and the city.
Absolutely. So it's a great question. Actually, it's perfect timing. Last night I was at a Barton Street functional redesign open house hosted by our chair and councillor, or through the chair first, let me say thank you for the question. And then I went to a open house hosted by our chair and my councillor, Narinder, last night. And transportation or the project manager design staff were on hand and presented the design, but they had some really robust information to share. I mean, they had a whole evaluation matrix of how they came to make decisions. They had cross sections, which are incredibly valuable to understand what the alignment would look like, but they also had alternative cross sections and subsequent alternative cross sections and how they came to choose each one. So, I mean, it was a lot to digest, but they laid it all out there really, and they showed how they came to these processes, and it was valuable to understand you know, what they were using to evaluate each step and along the way. I mean, so that's kind of the information I think would be valuable in terms of how to facilitate it. You know, a series of public open houses focused on the changes, right? We have an approved project design that the minister said we can use, and then we went about changing it basically the year after. And we've been doing that for the past 8 years of changing it. So we need to go back and look, here's our amendment record, and you know, this is why we made these changes, and here's how we can justify them. Because I think that the community needs to know what's happening.
Do you currently think that the staff recommendations proposed in the report today represents an adequate investment in a $3.4 billion project in terms of enhancements?
Well, I think they're valuable. I think it's difficult, like I mentioned, to understand where they fit into the picture, because water bottle fill stations are great. Actually, you don't have those along most street corridors, but what's happening before that? You know, what does the street furniture look like? We know that we have a street furniture plan, and we know that we have, you know, urban design guidelines and our complete streets design guidelines, but how are those actually being integrated into this project? What is the linear corridor going to actually look like before we start putting water bottle fill stations? That's where the empty spot is for me, to be honest.
So we have 14 kilometers of our city that's going to be generationally changed by this project. So in your opinion as a delegate, what would you like to see staff and Metrolinx do?
Yeah, we need design plates. We need change tracking to understand, you know, where we were and how we're at now. We need to see the decision-making information that they were using. We needed a transparent and a level playing field here to know, you know, we have this very similar priorities, I would imagine. You know, Metrolinx is not new to designing LRTs, and they have comprehensive standards that reflect similar best practices the city has, but we aren't really seeing where those are hitting the road here. And to have that laid out for all of us, you know, to have a discussion on it and for the community to be informed about it is the most valuable thing we can do at this stage.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions to our delegate? Seeing none, thank you again. Oh, my apologies. Councillor Kassar, go ahead.
Sorry, eScribe was giving me difficulties. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on engagement and say thank you, Pierre, very much for being here. Always do a great job delegating. So on engagement, so you described how you would like to see more, maybe what good looks like in your recent experience. And there's very different ways for the city and Metrolinx to engage with the public. It's in person, there's online, there's, you know, pop-ups at events, which all those things happen. Would you care to comment any more on what's more effective, or what kind of mix there should be for maybe different parts of the
Yeah.
engagement, if you have any thoughts?
For sure. Thank you for the question. Through the chair, I appreciate that Metrolinx is in the community, and certainly they show up at events and have their table and their booth. But it's more like here's who we are and here's what we're doing. 14 kilometers of light rail. And that's great. People, and I would imagine people ask questions, oh, is it still happening? Yeah. And where are the stops going to be? And, there's maybe a surface level engagement or the opportunity to connect further and discuss it more later. But I think, what I'm looking for and what the community deserves is a more thorough discussion, kind of a mid-level, that there's high level, there's, not really talking about much of the detail, then there's a mid-level, and then there's the detail level. I think, a mid-level and then, a detail level document like the EPR addendum that we will eventually require, will provide the public with, that additional information and, whether it's someone who just wants to skim through it and understand a little bit more, or whether it's somebody who wants to read the entire thing and know all about it. I think both of those are valuable things to have a little bit more on each tier of information, because there's no one size fits all when it comes to information sharing with the public. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And I imagine you'd be in the category of read through it all to know everything. So
Did both, yeah.
just a guess. Thanks, Chair.
As chair and observer of yesterday's meeting, yes.
Awesome.
I can also say that.
Thank you.
No further questions. Thank you so much, Pierre, for your delegation. Okay, now on to, we need to receive, so we need a mover and seconder to receive the delegation. Councillor Kassar, Councillor Huang, show of hands, vote. All those in favor? And that carries. Acknowledging that the mayor is also joined us virtually, so is adding her vote as well. Yes. Question to staff based on the delegation. You don't want to hold until it's at the report? It's related to an item on the agenda, so you could hold your question to them.
Well, it's just because I don't know if Pierre's going to stay, so that's why I wanted to ask the question to staff now while he's here.
Okay, you could.
Or if you're staying,
There you
never
go.
mind then. Okay. I just wanted to make sure, because sometimes we have delegates that come and then they leave right away, and sometimes they don't get their questions answered, so I'm just, okay, thank you, sorry.
No worries, don't worry. Good, we're on the same page. Item 7, no, wait, yes. Sorry, guys, I'm distracted today. 7.1, Hamilton LRT project update from our guests that we would like to very much welcome to the LRT subcommittee meeting, Metrolinx. So at this point, make your way over to the podium, please, and introduce yourselves. We're really grateful that you were able to join us before the year end, and a lot of members around the table looking forward to this presentation. As you're setting up for your presentation, there was a question about the fact that there are not accompanying documents on the public agenda, and we know that there's a presentation being shared with the committee. Just a question about, will we be able to receive the presentation after the fact, and it will be added to the public record? Okay, thank you so much. It's already published? Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much for having us here today. I'm Danielle Burry. I'm the Vice President of the Hamilton LRT project with Metrolinx. A long history on this project, so excited to be here to talk about some of the more recent updates and the exciting things to come in the new year. And I have my colleague here who I'll let introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. Kelly Anderson. I'm the Senior Manager of Community Engagement with Metrolinx. Nice to see many of you whose faces I recognize, and some of you are new that we'd love to connect with afterwards. So I'm going to start us off with a land acknowledgement before we get into our project update. Metrolinx acknowledges that we connect communities by building and operating transit within the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, for whom these lands continue to have great importance. Treaties between First Nations and governments cover these lands, and the promises contained in these treaties remain relevant to this day. Metrolinx and its employees are committed to understanding the history of these lands and the continued impacts of colonization, and take responsibility for actions to advance reconciliation. Metrolinx will continue to seek the knowledge, expertise, and experience of Indigenous partners, and commits to doing business in a manner that is built on a foundation of trust, respect, and collaboration. I'll turn it back over to Danielle now.
Thank you, Kelly. As Kelly mentioned, there's some new faces around the table, many we recognize and some new faces. So as she said, would love an opportunity to connect one-on-one in other forums as well to get a better understanding of the groups you're representing and how we can work together throughout the duration of this project. And also because we have some new faces around the table, just thought we'd start with a little bit of a level set in terms of what the project is. Make sure we're all on the same page of what we're delivering and what we're here to talk about today. So the Hamilton LRT project, it's 14 kilometers of at-grade light rail transit from McMaster in the west to Eastgate in the east. There are 17 stops. They are all at grade. We don't have large stations underground like some of the other projects you may be familiar with at Metrolinx. The corridor, as I said, is mostly at grade. There are a couple of bridges and one underpass under the CPKC line. But mostly the idea is that this LRT system will integrate seamlessly into the community. It's really about community building and about bringing a lot of activity to this corridor. So some of the project benefits that you may have heard before, but we'll go over again today, is our early ridership studies have shown that this can attract 50,000 or more daily boardings. We already know that this corridor is a high demand transit corridor in terms of the B-Line HSR. We have high frequency on that right now, and the capacity is such that we're seeing such high ridership that that's one of the reasons LRT is the appropriate technology for this corridor, such that it is there to meet the demand of what we're seeing for transit riders along this corridor. There's strong connections. Along this corridor, we see over 100,000 people and 57,000 jobs, all within a 10-minute walk of LRT. And as the community continues to grow, this provides flexibility and options for how we get around our city. It also looks to increase reliability. This is on tracks, fixed tracks. It is separate from traffic, and it has systems to support it such that there is a reliability index there that when you expect the train to be there, we hope that it's there. And again, comfort is another thing that we're looking at. Being on fixed rails and larger LRV vehicles, it provides a smooth ride. And lastly, as I said, it attracts long-term development. One of the main value adds of this project is looking at economic development and how we can see the transformation of this community and how we integrate with that development. So how are we going to deliver this 14-kilometer LRT line? So the short answer is we've already started in multiple different ways, and we'll go over in this presentation some of the things we've already been doing. But ultimately, there are two main packages of works with a third package that has been underway. So the first one is our Advanced Enabling Works package. This is around getting a lot of the utilities and due diligence to clear the path to allow for major construction to happen with our two next major packages of work. The first major package is for civil and utilities. So this is all underground utilities. This isn't just an LRT project, this is actually a full city building project. For the full 14 kilometers where LRT will operate, all utilities, both public and private, water mains, sewers, power, telecommunications, everything is being replaced for that corridor. It's a lot of work, and it is work that is complex in terms of a lot of the infrastructure that we're dealing with is quite old. It's at the end of its life cycle. So this is our opportunity to really renew the infrastructure along the corridor. Along with this package, you will see things like full road reconstruction, public realm reconstruction, looking at things like streetscaping and complete street redevelopment along the corridor. The next package of works would be our stops, rails, and systems. So this is everything LRT. The first package of works is clearing the way, and the second package of works is when we get to see LRT in our community. So this is one of our biggest updates to share today in terms of the progress we've made of bringing on board a partner. So we talked about that first major package of works being civil and utilities. That package is being delivered via what we call an alliance contract model. We've been in procurement to have this alliance partner in the market since November of 2024. In May of 2025, we released a request for proposals to 4 pre-qualified parties who showed that they had the expertise and the capability to deliver a mega project of this size and complexity. I'm happy to say that we have closed that RFP process and we received 4 submissions in November. All 4 parties submitted a submission in response to this project, and I just want to say, looking at the industry that we're in, having 4 teams interested in putting in submissions just really shows the high level of interest and engagement the market has on this project. They see the opportunity of what this infrastructure has for Hamilton and the opportunity to be a part of that. We don't often see necessarily this level of engagement from the market, so it's just, I really want to share the exciting news that there's a strong level of interest in how we're going to be delivering this project. The 4 teams that were shortlisted and who have submitted submissions are on the screen. They are all formed with both contractor and designing partners. The applicant leads are on all of the teams here. So we have one, it's led by Atkins Realis, Major Projects. Another, which is Dufferin, which is from the CRH group. We have a Canadian Murphy joint venture team, as well as a team led by AECON. All of the submissions that were received in November are currently under evaluation. I don't know who wins yet, so don't ask. But we're excited to share that information early on in the new year. So early on in the new year, the selected successful party will be shared, and we hit the ground running at that point. The contract will be executed, and we'll be heading into full-on delivery mode from both a detailed design and development process leading into major construction. So what does it mean when we sign that contract? That contract is called an Alliance Development Agreement. What that is an agreement to enter into a development phase. One of the interesting components of using an alliance model to deliver our project is that we get a period, which we're estimating to be about 18 to 24 months for this project, to be able to work through the details with our partners on both the contractor and the designer side. So there will be ongoing design development. We heard the delegate earlier say that there was a conceptual design released this year that forms the foundation and the basis by which we will continue to develop that design. So that design that we have in the public realm right now, we consider somewhere around the 5 to 10% design mark. Throughout this process, we get into full detailed design 60% or more. So a lot of those details start to get worked through, resolved, and then into the implementation phase. 2 of the main benefits of using a development phase in a contract model like this. One is target cost advancement. So we're able to look at real details, real design to determine what the real costs will be. In previous models, what would happen is based on that conceptual design, we would get a fixed price through our P3 contracts. This allows us to understand the true quantity of materials. It allows us to understand means and methods, durations, et cetera. So this provides us a greater level of certainty of what we're doing in terms of the overall development of the target cost for the project. The other one is our construction schedule. And I know this is one of the major questions that we get asked. And unfortunately, we still say we don't know. And that's the honest truth. We have a lot of benchmarking in terms of the projects that we've seen both in Ontario and globally. But each project is unique, and there are a lot of contributing factors that lead to the overall duration of construction. One of the main things that we see is the balance between the level of disruption that the community can accept versus the overall duration of how long the project will take. So for example, if we were to dig up all 14 kilometers at once, it would happen a lot faster than if we're doing in 7 or 8 different segments. So one of the opportunities through this development phase is giving us an opportunity to work with our contractor, our designer, and even community groups to understand what level of disruption is right for this community. What level of road closures, intersection closures, segmentation, full closures versus separate. Those are all the details that this development phase allows us to work through together to make sure that we're making the right decision in terms of balancing disruption and overall duration. It also gives us a better understanding through the means and methods. So we have some complex pieces such as structures over MTO highways or an underpass with CPKC. We have third parties who are fully integrated into this process, and the development phase allows us to work with them in detail to understand what that overall duration will be. What I will say is from a communication perspective, none of this will ever be a surprise. We want to be proactive, we want to be early, and give the community an indication of when we will be in front of your business or in front of your home. It's never going to be we show up one day and you have no idea what's going on or where we're at. As we get this information throughout the development phase, we hope to work closely with our stakeholders and the community to both share that information as well as seek feedback in some key areas, such as deliveries and how do we account for those. So there's a lot of work on the construction schedule side that's going to take place over the next 18 to 24 months. And that's really one of the biggest lessons learned that we've taken from our projects in the Metrolinx portfolio, to be able to take that time to do it right and do the planning phase. We also have value management opportunities as we go through this process. So we have a funding envelope. Both the provincial and federal government have committed to funding this project at $3.4 billion. As we go through the details, this allows us to look at value engineering and value management opportunities in terms of our materials, in terms of our means and methods. There's a lot of opportunities in which we can be flexible. In some of our other delivery models, everything is set up front, and then you're delivering based on a low percentage of kind of design. This allows us to incorporate that value management and value engineering processes as we develop our design, our cost, and our schedule. We'll also be looking to do our ongoing advancement of the Stops, Rails, and Systems package. Hamilton corridor for LRT is actually very unique in terms of it is old infrastructure and it is very narrow. In certain cases, if we look at International Village, we're 17 meters from building face to building face. That's somewhat unheard of. So as a result, we need to make sure that although we're delivering this work in multiple packages, those packages are fully integrated and the interfaces are understood. So as we develop the civil and utilities package, we will also be developing the level of design required on stops, rails, and systems to make sure that we're reducing the potential for rework in the future and understanding how all of the pieces of the puzzle fit together. Also concurrently with the development phase activities, we will continue our enabling works program, which we'll talk about in subsequent slides. There's also additional early works opportunities. And I know they sound like the same thing, but I'll help demystify what the difference is. So our enabling works packages are packages of work that are being undertaken by Metrolinx or its partners. For example, City of Hamilton, some of the water main works that we've seen happen recently. The early works are opportunities for our contractor and designer to identify early on in the development phase strategic works that would allow us to reduce overall schedule and cost if we were to do them early. So within the first 180 days of the development phase, there is a requirement for our partner to submit an early works proposal. And soon after that, you may see shovels in the ground depending on the outcome of that proposal. But again, we will always be proactive, early, often, frequent communication in terms of what to expect. So some of our ongoing works, I mentioned this is an old corridor, a narrow corridor. So we've been doing a lot of due diligence work. We want to know what we're getting into. With that said, without ripping up the entire corridor, the reality of this is that we're going to find things that we just don't know are there. I worked on the Waterloo Ion project for quite a few years, and we found something called a corduroy road. If you have an interest in looking up, those are old log roads in which horse and buggies would use. Certain things that when you use our fancy technology, they're not picking up logs under the surface. So even then, we've already started to find in our enabling works packages of work some interesting things. So we have a community office, which Kelly will talk about a little bit later, where we actually have an old rail from the original streetcar line within the downtown that we have on display at our community office. We also found an old wooden water main. Obviously, it was out of commission, luckily. You weren't drinking out of a wooden water main, but we do have those types of things that we're finding. And even then, some of our older buildings in terms of basements or keg chutes we found are things that are going to be discovered as we go through. So by doing a lot of our subsurface investigations, this is giving us the best picture in terms of what risks and what are we going to expect when we do eventually have to tear up the road. And this is another thing that will contribute to the overall duration of construction. By doing this early work, we're able to mitigate or design around some of the constraints that we find through the due diligence activities. We've also done a lot of environmental work. You've probably seen, and we have some pictures on the screen here, species at risk work in terms of, we found chimney swifts, which are a species at risk in a couple of our properties. And so we've either maintained or created compensation habitat for that species along the corridor. We are also looking at our tree inventory and replacement strategy. We get this question a lot. There are beautiful, mature trees along this corridor. Unfortunately, a lot of them, if not all of them, get impacted in one way or another, whether or not it's the root system or for full removal. And there's a lot of reasons why. One, we're widening the corridor. Two, we're moving utilities, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and that root system of trees can interact with that utility relocation. But we are committed to putting back a replacement strategy of even more trees than we take out. And we have a strategy that we've worked on with the city in terms of the hierarchy of how that works. Ideally, we want to put them back in the corridor where we found them. If not possible, we look adjacent. If not possible, we look within the lower city, and so on. So there are a lot of details around the replacement strategy to ensure that what we are impacting and what we are taking out gets put back into our community. We've also done ongoing engagement with our Indigenous communities. This is something we start early, and again, we'll continue often in seeking those feedback through our environmental due diligence program. They get all of the information in terms of what we're doing and are invited as needed and appropriate to some of those activities. We've also done a lot of property acquisitions. I think this is something everyone's heard through multiple different sources over the past few years. The majority of the full property acquisitions, and when we say full property acquisitions, that's full buildings, that's demolitions. Those are almost complete. The partials, they are underway. We're probably around 30 to 40% through. With that said, you will have also seen probably in the newspapers expropriation notices for the majority of the partials have been released. With that said, those expropriation notices are backstops. We try and get all of our property through amicable negotiations with the owner. We have been doing demolitions as well. 63 have been completed to date, and they continue through next year. I know it seems like those have been demolished and not a lot of activity has happened since that demolition was complete. What I will say is that enabling works program we talked about, a lot of those works require those properties. So when we say the enabling works and the early works activities are ramping up next year, they typically happen where those properties have occurred. For example, the CPKC underpass, where we have to work with CPKC in terms of train detours to get that work underway, required property in that area. And then our enabling works program. So we've had a great partnership with the utility owners. So the City of Hamilton in terms of water mains. Thank you for your leadership in that area. Those projects have been done on time and under budget in most cases. And we continue to look forward to working on that. As we go forward, we've also been working with utilities such as Electra and Bell to get a lot of the main distribution lines off the corridor so that the remaining utilities on the corridor are really related to servicing the properties along the 14 kilometers. So why do we relocate utilities? Really, it's around reliability of the service. When we talked about what are the value adds of LRT and the benefits of LRT in the first slide, one of them was reliability. If utilities remain underneath the guideway where LRT operates, every time those utilities need to be maintained, they would cause a disruption to service. So we are relocating all of those utilities from outside of the guideway, which means they're either under the roadway or under the sidewalk, to ensure that the LRT service can continue uninhibited through its life cycle. And then why are we doing the enabling works? Really, it's to maximize our overall duration and schedule. It's also to get things out of the way that we know have a low likelihood of change over time. So if we're moving something off corridor, there's very little risk of rework as a result because the works and the major packages are going to happen along the corridor. This is just a map, and we've shared this in the past, but continue to share it here. I won't go through each individual one, but it shows by utility and by area along the corridor the works that are currently planned and underway. You can see some of the images in this slide, as well as this one. I will say you'll see a big red box. It doesn't mean the entire red box is under construction. It's just an area. So it's typically these works for the red, which is hydro. They're happening on hydro poles within the right-of-way. So don't worry, it's not the entire area that is under construction. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kelly.
Thank you, Danielle. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about what our role is in community engagement and how we play that in the project, but also with the local neighborhoods that are along this 14-kilometer corridor. Our engagement team, if you don't know, we're all local to Hamilton. We're part of this community. We love this city. And so we have a vested interest in making this as successful and painless as possible and want to work with all of the relevant stakeholder groups and neighborhood groups and all of the elected officials around the table here as well to try and make this the best possible project that we can. Our goal is to foster open and two-way conversations with the community, elected officials, the business community, community organizations. You'll find us at events big and small. We've been to Open Streets, for example, Super Crawl, smaller local farmers markets across the city. We engaged with about 3,200 people at those events this year. I'll get to that in the next slide where I have a little bit of a snapshot of some of the activities that we did this year. We also have a really amazing program where we go out to grade 5 classes across the city and talk about, it's called Transit in Your Community, and we talk about the LRT project and how governments play a role in transit, sustainability, and how the LRT will operate in the community. And that's something we're going to expand a lot more, is how we work with the school boards and schools as we get closer to construction, making sure that they have safe pathways to school as well when we start closing roads and having disruption in the community. Whenever there's construction work happening in a neighborhood, our team goes out and provides advance notice to the adjacent residents as well. We hand deliver notices for demolitions, borehole drilling, works like that that are happening, and we work with our partners at the city when they are notifying neighborhoods about the early works that they're doing as well. Danielle mentioned we have a community office right in the heart of our downtown near Gore Park. It's part of the Connaught building. We're at 116 King Street East. So we're there Tuesdays and Thursdays right now between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Those days and hours will expand as the project evolves a little bit as well. So we're out in the community as much as possible. We like to go where people are, but we do have that space at the community office as well. I have our phone number and email, which I'll share in the next couple slides as well. So as I mentioned, this is just a snapshot of some of the activities that we've done this year. So we've been out to a number of festivals in those classrooms that I mentioned. Carl from the Community Benefits Network helped set us up a meeting with the membership of his group back in the spring, which was really helpful. We had an open house, a virtual open house this past June. We were blown away by the number of registrants that we had. We had over 1,000 people register for that to get an update, and so that just demonstrates that a lot of people are really interested in this project and want to know more information. I won't go through every bullet point, but you can see that we've been out there a lot, getting information out, either hand delivering notices, hosting meetings in our community office, and then, like I mentioned, we went to about 13 events throughout the city as well. Communication is going to be important. Danielle touched on this a lot in her presentation, and I'll just say it's really helpful that Danielle, who's leading the project from a technical sense, she really appreciates communications and engagement, and so it's really wonderful to be able to work with her on this as well. I know she really cares about it. We will be establishing construction liaison committees sometime probably within that development phase that Danielle mentioned as we get a little bit closer to having details for construction. Continuing to canvass, door knocking along the corridor, social media, newsletters, those kinds of things, ongoing briefings. Job fairs will be something that comes up as we get further along as well. Site visits are something that we do quite often when residents or businesses have questions about how things are going to look. We're always happy to go out and meet with them. And then again, youth engagement and more open houses. So we just wanted to show, this is kind of a neat little graphic. The postal codes of the registrants for our June virtual open house are mapped out here, and you can it just demonstrates, obviously there's a cluster of people who are interested that are on the corridor. We hand-delivered 1,500 postcards to residents and businesses on the corridor to make sure that they were aware of the opportunity to get an update at this open house. We also did a targeted social media campaign, and we decided to make it for the whole city of Hamilton and not just the corridor itself, because we figured that a lot of people all across the city are interested in this, just given the transformational and complex nature of this project. So we had, like I said, 1,000 plus registrants, and then 500 people actually attended in the end. And it's still available on the website. We've had about 1,100 views post-event as well. But it just shows, you can see there's people in Burlington, on the mountain, all the different pockets of the city that are interested in the project. And so that's helpful for us to see, and we're going to continue those efforts. That it's, obviously the people that are most impacted by this work, they will get a different sort of level of communication, but we're going to make sure that the full city of Hamilton is aware as this project progresses as well, given the interest. And how to stay connected. So I mentioned the community office. There's our email and our phone number as well for our community engagement team. And then for social, we're on a number of different channels at Hamilton LRT. You can follow us there. And I think we're going to end now. If it's okay, I think we'll take our questions back at the panel with Abdul.
Sounds good. Thank you both for the detailed presentation. I will open up the speakers list for questions to Metrolinx. So at this point, if you could all just start indicating, those of you who can indicate through eScribe, do that. And then otherwise, I'm just going to name folks, and then our LCs can keep the speakers list for me. So we have Member Andrus, we have Councillor Huang. I have anybody virtually looking to indicate to ask questions? Okay, so we'll begin with Member Andrus.
Thank you very much, Chair. Question for Metrolinx. Specifically, you did not talk at all about community benefits or supports or your 4 pillars in your presentation today. And I'm curious where that fits into your vision for this 14-kilometer transformative project.
Through the chair, thank you for that question. So the 4-pillar strategy for community benefits is very much intact and an important part of how we deliver this project. So there's 1 pillar, which is focused on working with disruption and working with businesses through that. Kelly can add on to that a little bit afterwards. After I address some of the other pillars and how they've been progressing in terms of business supports throughout construction. Another pillar is looking at our diversity, equity, and inclusion targets in terms of job creation. So we talked a little bit about the benefits of LRT being job creation in this community. And so as part of the community benefits framework, we do have requirements that we have with our contractors and designers in terms of targets for those DEI equity deserving groups in terms of how they are included and given the opportunities to engage. In terms of the public realm improvements, we've had a long discussion on these with the City of Hamilton throughout the life cycle of this project in terms of some of the community public realm improvements that have already been integrated. So just a couple examples of things that we've integrated into the design to date include urban braille throughout the entire 14 kilometers, looking at International Village in terms of making it a pedestrianized zone with increased quality in terms of the surface aesthetics and materials that we're using throughout International Village. We've also looked at certain things in terms of the look and feel of streetlight poles and bollards and fitting in with communities such as like the Victorian light poles, et cetera. So a lot of them have already been incorporated into the design. With that said, we continue to have the discussion with the city in terms of other opportunities for public realm improvements. And then the last pillar is in terms of how we connect as Metrolinx, the different groups who have interests along the corridor in terms of things that may not be directly under Metrolinx's ability to deliver through this mechanism of the project, but where we have that opportunity to create those connections. For example, affordable housing is something that's often brought up in terms of that being a relationship between the provincial and federal government, but as Metrolinx, we can provide information and support in connecting there. And so maybe I'll hand it over to Kelly to just talk a little bit more around the business support strategy.
Sure. Business supports is the pillar 2 of the program, and that is something that we're going to be developing a comprehensive strategy once we get a little bit further along in knowing what the impacts would look like. We want to make sure that we develop that in tandem with the Chamber of Commerce and the BIAs and other members of the business community. I know there are some pockets of the corridor that don't have BIAs, so looking for any suggestions folks might have about how to make sure that we connect anybody in those pockets as well. But that is definitely something that we're going to be working on. And then we, as projects that some of the enabling works are happening, we are engaging businesses already. We've met with the businesses on Frid Street, for example, which is where the run-in track for the future operations, maintenance, and storage facility will go, and had some sort of focus group type sessions with them as well in terms of impacts. So that's something that we'll have more information to share probably in the development phase.
Thank you. One more further question on affordable housing and connections. Metrolinx is now a property owner of, 91 full properties along the corridor that include large developable blocks of land. And I'm curious what your plans are post construction for those lands.
Through the chair, thank you. So one of the first things we need to do is ensure that the properties that we've acquired in terms of the full buyouts, we understand what the full need is in terms of the construction period. So we'll be looking at how those lands are used for construction staging and laydown areas for materials, as well as I said, for a lot of our enabling works projects, those properties are required. The longer term strategy, they are properties that are owned by the province, and the decision on any disposition of those is a decision by the province in relation to something referred to as the Ontario Realty Directive. Metrolinx can play, again, a connecting role in terms of taking any thoughts or questions and making sure that communication is happening at the provincial level. But just for clarity, Metrolinx plays a connecting role as part of that fourth pillar in terms of the long-term strategy for those properties.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, last question. Just Metrolinx has displaced approximately 250 residents along the corridor. What are your long-term strategies to address that through either the 4-pillar strategy or just as an organization?
Through the chair, yes. So as part of the acquisition demolition process, a lot of tenants have been relocated. We have a robust strategy with a tenant relocation specialist who understands each individual's needs. We can't get into specifics on any one because, as I said, the program is addressed for each individual who is impacted as part of this. The longer term strategy in terms of affordable housing, again, that goes back to my previous answer in terms of conversations with the province and the longer term vision in terms of how affordable housing will be integrated into the project.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, quickly, I'm just very curious to know why Metrolinx has rolled out a different tenant package for tenants based on what tenants can demand rather than what tenants can of course expect, and why it is that you haven't produced at least universal package for tenants. Some get 10 grand, some get 1 grand, some get nothing. So I'm just curious why that is and how Metrolinx looks forward to addressing that.
Member, is that about kind of exposing a little bit more about the evaluative criteria used in these supports? Thank you.
Through the chair, Metrolinx does have a tenant relocation policy by which it sets the framework in terms of how the discussions and solutions for each individual tenant are addressed. Again, it's a highly sensitive discussion and it's based on each individual, so we're not able to disclose the individual solutions. However, it was based on a comprehensive tenant relocation policy, not only used for this project, but all of our Metrolinx projects.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, member. Next up, we have Councillor Huang.
Thank you. I have a bunch of just clarifying questions because I appreciate this presentation, but we still, as a counselor, get asked questions all the time around the funding. Is this fully committed? Are we going to have cost overruns? Is this actually happening, especially when we have residents that write to us in our ward offices saying that even the MPs at the federal level are not aware about the $1.7 billion commitment. So I think that perhaps if you can just give us a little bit of clarity on how we can expect, this is a $3.4 billion project, but there hasn't been much talk about how this money gets allocated. And this is a question I've asked Director Shake, where we have a very generalized answer that comes back. So could you provide a little more clarity on essentially when does this get funded? Residents are worried about overruns, so help us with answering some of those questions if you could.
Through the chair, thank you. So yes, the $3.4 billion is divided between federal and provincial contributions. The announcement included $1.7 billion from each. In terms of what that is contributed to, so that is capital cost for the project, the 3.4. And as I mentioned earlier, the development phase will allow us to go through in details to figure out the exact buckets in terms of how that 3.4 is divided between the packages and between the different items of scope. In terms of commitment, from a provincial level, Hamilton LRT is one of the 5 priority projects under the Building Transit Faster Act. The province and Metrolinx maintain full dedication to proceeding based on how we've discussed in this presentation on this project. From the federal contribution, the federal government, as far as we're aware, remains fully committed, and all of the information that has been requested to support that funding commitment has been provided. The provincial and federal governments talk directly in terms of that. So Metrolinx, again, provides a facilitator role in making sure we're providing all of the information. But from both provincial and federal government, as far as we're aware, there's a full dedication to proceeding with this project, fully funded, and any costs associated with that 3.4 are always subject to government decision. With that said, we wouldn't be here today if we didn't have the approvals to be able to proceed. There are procedures in place, so in order to even be at the place where we're at in terms of awarding a contract next year, we have the full government commitment to be able to enter into that contract.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I understand that that's exactly where we're at, but I think that residents still feel confused by this because let me just use something super easy. If I want to buy a car, for example, it hasn't been built yet, I can put in some sort of a down payment, or maybe I can put some sort of layaway plan. I think what we might need is some sort of like very simplified sort of almost like flow chart of understanding when monies get paid, because I think that residents just don't have that same sense of understanding of, even though everything is fully committed, we also know that prices are going up and up and up. So that's where they have a lot of concern about, okay, it's committed at this day and time, but what if it doesn't come into fruition for another 10, 15 years? And that present value at the 10, 15-year mark might be way more than $3.4 billion. So again, I don't know if this is the right venue to speak it out loud, but I think that there needs to be some sort of a graphic or some sort of a document that talks about this happens, then this, and these are where the dollar amounts hit bank accounts, and then that's how it gets fed. Because I even asked Director Shake, Ward 4, we have early work, enablement. We have enablement where the city is paying for it, but then it's being billed back directly to Metrolinx. Now, does that come out of the $3.4 billion? We don't know. Those are questions that I think that residents are still struggling with. So if I could put that bug in your ear to think about how best to communicate how the business model works, so then that way it can ease fears in residents about cost overruns, also mitigating risks, and how would those risks happen. My second question is around the cadence of releasing these design developments, similar to what Pierre was asking for. Because I get that we're in this stage where there are 4 proponents, they're going to create their own packages. But again, I can understand Pierre's concern because we're talking about enablements and betterments, which is putting the cart ahead of the horse. So could you just share a little bit in terms of what is the expected cadence of showing off these design development drawings, renderings, ideas, even though I know that you're in this weird gray zone because you're still in that evaluative phase of the 4 proponents, but just to help us understand timing-wise.
Through the chair. So I think did you want me to respond to both questions?
Sure.
Okay, so the first one in relation to how money flows. Without getting into too much detail on how an alliance contract works, it may help to demystify some of the key concepts of an alliance model. So it's an actual cost contract. So we pay the actual cost. It's not a bid upfront in which it's a fixed price and everything falls within there. And then as the project progresses and the market changes, there's adjustments as a result. We pay as the project progresses. With that said, there is an agreed upon through the development phase target outturn cost. And that forms the foundation upon which we award those costs. And then there's something called a pain share, gain share regime, which is essentially we win together, we lose together. So in the alliance, our 3.4, if it goes over the 3.4, that erodes the profit and overhead of our partners. Whereas if we come in under budget, we're all gaining in terms of the opportunities for those cost saves. So there's a whole theory around the cost flow, which works a little bit differently in the alliance model, but essentially the payments happen as the work progresses because it's actual costs. And we have full transparency in the alliance model. It's an open book contract, so we see all of the rates, we see all of the subcontracting tender packages, et cetera. So it gives us full visibility on the cost buildup and the cost expenditure associated with the project. We can work on, from a communications perspective, a little bit more of like an Alliance 101. It's new to the province and Canada, and I'm sure my communications team can do a much better job of making it accessible in terms of explaining it than I can. But that's on the Alliance model. On the second question in terms of design progression, so the conceptual design, which we have in the public, is the design that we have. And I just want to clarify, there's a lot of different ways in which we engage. So, this project, we had our original transit project assessment EPR document in 2011, and then we had an addendum in 2017. The regulation that was referenced earlier has requirements in terms of how changes are documented. We've been following that regulation in terms of what the requirements are for documentation and consultation as we go along. So just a little bit of clarity on what that looks like. Any major changes of provincial significance are the ones that require kind of that full year, full city level engagement. However, there are different levels of significance of changes, and each level of significance requires a different level of consultation. So any of the changes that we see, they fall under different buckets. That's all available kind of under the regulation. With that said, we engage in a lot of different ways, and it's not just necessarily on the LRT design in and of itself. So for example, a lot of what we're building through this project is city infrastructure. So we're looking at the urban realm, we're looking at roads, and a lot of that, the consultation happens through standard. We as Metrolinx are building the city infrastructure on behalf of the city, but we are beholden to kind of city standards. So as engagement happens in terms of your complete streets guideline or your policies in terms of what are required for curb and gutter or road, those are all things that we incorporate into our design. If those either guidelines or strategies or requirements aren't able to be met because of some physical constraint, we work with either the specific strategic stakeholder that is impacted as well as the city to make that decision in terms of how those different requirements are attributed. So for example, we wanted to reduce building demolition as much as we can. By doing that, sometimes we had to make the decision in working with our stakeholders, okay, instead of the 4.75 from Complete Streets, can we deal with with 4 to be able to maintain that. So those are the very minuscule level decisions that are made. And we do very targeted consultation for those, both with the asset owner, in this case the city, it could be MTO, it could be CPKC, as well as the local area stakeholders. So for example, as we go through, if there's something impacting International Village, we'll work with International Village. We're really trying to get from that conceptual level into the delivery stage. And so we're starting to work through those details with the groups that are impacted most. So we're looking at very kind of strategic, targeted consultation in making those decisions, because the requirements and the standards and the guidelines, most of those exist for every asset that we're doing. And now it's just about how we fit those pieces of the puzzle together and making sure we're engaging the right stakeholders and asset owners.
Thank you, Chair. I have one more question, but if you want me to go on for a second time, I can go. Okay. I appreciate Kelly's answer about business supports, so that's where I want to drill down into, because almost all of Ward 4 has no BIA. And so I would like to, I know that myself and Councillor Wilson have also put forward at the Open for Business Subcommittee. We've also, at other subcommittees, we have actually talked about LRT and business supports at other subcommittees to ensure that we're trying to get alignment at the different city departments. But we've also asked our economic development to do consistent scans of municipal jurisdictions on different ideas for business supports, because this is a very huge worry. And we know that the minute you break ground, it's going to cause a significant amount of turmoil in the business community. So I cannot stress enough, we really, 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 really need to be lockstep in this in terms of business supports. And I can see that my chamber colleagues are also here. I'm sure that they'll all agree, and the BIAs will all agree, but the business supports, I don't know if there's an opportunity to think outside the box and be a little more innovative, because our businesses are struggling today and they will struggle again when we break ground. So I cannot stress enough, business supports needs to be first and foremost in a lot of different parts, but specifically in Ward 4. Thanks.
Thanks for that, through the chair. It's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about too, and your comment about innovation is something that we really, there are a lot of lessons learned from other Metrolinx projects in Toronto that are helpful, but I think I've said this before to a few of you, we want something that's really tailored to this community. Hamilton's unique and different, and it does feel like a small town sometimes, and there's that grassroots kind of vibe, and I think there's a lot of really interesting opportunities that we can explore here around business supports, and even you mentioned economic development. I think that we have a wonderful partnership with the city. We sit on the same floor as them at the Stelco Tower. I think there's a lot of partnerships and opportunities that we can implement. It's just a matter of balancing when is the right time to go out and do some of that, because we are hearing from businesses, they want to know, when are you going to be in front of my business, how long? They want to understand that, and I can totally empathize with that, but they do sometimes get frustrated that we don't have those answers yet. So it's sort of that balance of when is the right time to go out and get them prepared and start talking about these kinds of things. So I think probably the development phase kicks off sometime in the new year, and that'll be the time that we start really drilling down in that area a little bit more. And we have had some conversations with the chamber already and the BIAs, and if there's folks that you can introduce us to in some of those pockets that don't have BIA representatives, would love to talk to you about that as well. So more to come on that, but thank you for that.
Thank you. No further, oh yes, there is. Councillor Crutch? No, wait a minute, you're not on the speaker's list? You are on the speaker's list? Perfect. You're on the speaker's list, and then when you're done, just hold the chair, because then I'm on the speaker's list. So go ahead.
You got it. Happy to do that. Thanks very much to Metrolinx for being here. I know that there's been a lot of discussion about asking that you're present at these meetings, and so that's really my question, is you're here today, you've given us a high-level overview. I think for some people this has probably been helpful. For some of us, we've heard this before, and as you know, I know all you reasonably well at this point. We meet semi-regularly, sometimes not even about this topic, but other Metrolinx topics. So my question, when will you be back? How often will you be here?
Through the chair. Thank you for that. And yes, actually, that's a good point in the fact that we meet quite often. And I think that's piggybacking on what I said in a previous response in terms of we like to be very strategic in our conversation. We want to make sure that we're bringing something where we have the right people to have those discussions with the right cadence of making those decisions. With that said, this project's really going to ramp up once we sign the agreement, and there isn't a set cadence in which we would come back to subcommittee, only because we'll be developing out the schedule. But we have commitments to come back as it makes sense in terms of key milestones and key opportunities where we can connect. But with that said, everyone around the table, whether it's a councillor or community member, this isn't the only forum in which we can connect and have that communication. So I think it's going to be a multi-pronged approach as we go throughout this project in terms of one-on-one individual consultation, but also making sure we have these opportunities to connect in this larger forum to have those conversations. So we plan to come back. I don't have a schedule in terms of this is exactly when and why, but that is something even in our one-on-one discussions we can have in terms of making sure we're here at the appropriate times.
Thanks. And my experience, especially with public meetings and public conversation, actually the conversations we have here are totally different than the kinds of conversations we might have about a detailed specific thing. And it gives the opportunity for folks who may not have access or other time, right? People are committed to being here at these meetings, and they may not have other time to set up meetings to discuss LRT with folks. And so this is a good time to do that. I would ask if you can to please just commit to coming on a more regular basis regardless. I think the normalcy of you being at these meetings is important, not just being here when there's something to talk to. I think it's important to set that tone of, hey, Metrolinx is a partner, they're available, they're here on a regular basis. And so as you look ahead to 2026, 2027, if you can commit to coming 2 times a year, quarterly, whatever it might be, I think it'd be really, really beneficial to the committee and the public, and especially around building trust and confidence in the process, right? So even being able to ask questions sometimes that maybe we're just hearing from people or anxieties and having you give answers is helpful, because oftentimes what we hear from our city staff is, sorry, can't answer that, that's a Metrolinx question. So, you know, they're going to come up iteratively and sometimes spontaneously. So just encouraging you to be here as much as you possibly can be. And on that, those are my questions and comments, and I'll take the chair while you go ahead, Councillor Nan.
Thank you. Through you, Vice Chair, just again, thank you so much for your presentation and for coming. As you can hear, we appreciate you being here at the table, and to the point about public having an opportunity through the municipally hosted LRT subcommittee gives residents another opportunity to hear directly from Metrolinx, and I think it's an important opportunity as we continue going forward as partners. My question is just to pick up on Delegate Roy's point. In your presentation, you did reference it, but if you could clarify what can be expected by our residents regarding the design process to come, and specifically how it will enable direct public input. Because you mentioned we're at like 5% design, and we're moving towards substantive design once we have our alliance established. So if you could just break that down for us, that'd be great.
Through the vice chair, I think I got that right. So I think I mentioned a little bit before in terms of the design development at this point. Once you move past the conceptual into the detailed design process, it is really around having those strategic directed conversations with the stakeholder and the asset owner in terms of how the pieces fit together. From a full-scale, large consultation citywide that has been done in the past, those requirements under the regulation have been fulfilled. With that said, this is not to say that we won't have consultation. It's just that the consultation looks a little bit different. In terms of the detailed design, we'll continue to have updates in terms of full comprehensive design progression. Any major changes, absolutely, is something we would have conversation around. But what would have happened in 2017, that was a requirement that was fulfilled. And now our communication and engagement strategy in terms of design development is more strategic and targeted to those stakeholders.
Thank you. Through you, Vice Chair, then if I could just clarify, when that detailed design process work is underway with strategically with the stakeholders, i.e., you're going to strategically sit down with the City of Hamilton, walk through the detailed design and say, hey, stakeholder, do you have anything more to contribute before we move to the next iteration of the design? Just so it's really clear in plain language for our residents to understand.
Through the Vice Chair, absolutely. our first package of works, mostly city-owned infrastructure in terms of utilities, roads, and public realm. You are the owner of that asset. You are the owner of that standard and requirements. We will be sitting down daily. We're co-located with our City of Hamilton staff. That's why we actually wanted to answer questions here to show that Director Sheikh, I know him as Abdul, is fully integrated within our team. And we have those conversations all day, every day in terms of how those decisions get made. And then we have other levels on top of that, like I said, in terms of meeting with the ward councilors or meeting with whether it's a BIA or a community group that's directly impacted. So yes, there is very open, targeted design progression discussions happening with the city.
Thank you. And then through you, Vice Chair, as those updates become established, will they be shared publicly? Is that the requirement moving forward? Is that as each iteration of design is considered confirmed, will those then be released publicly?
Through the vice chair. It is not a regulatory requirement for the design to be released at each kind of specific percentage progression. With that said, if there are visible changes or major changes that occur, one, we would do the regulatory requirement and looking at what the impacts are, and that dictates the level of consultation. But again, people are going to see it when it's built. We want to make sure that at the right cadence and as things progress and change, we have opportunities to share that. So to answer your question, it's not a regulatory requirement, but we do have plans as it progresses to look at how we can release the information to make sure that we're taking the public along the journey in terms of how it's progressing.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair, I think the final question I have is actually for our staff. So would it be appropriate to hold that until after receiving this presentation? Just to clarify, maybe the LC could help us out.
Vice Chair, you could hold it until after receiving the presentation if you prefer.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions. I'll take back the chair. Anybody else on the speakers list? Second time, Member Andrus.
Just very quickly for Metrolinx, has the federal government and the province signed an agreement on the project? I know that was a sticking point for a while. So has that agreement happened?
Through the chair, any agreement between the province and federal government, I'm not privy to. However, I know we have all of the approvals in hand in order for us to proceed based on the announcement and the full dedication to proceeding. Any questions on any formal agreement is something that would have to be discussed with the government directly.
Do you think that your office would be able to share with this committee an update on that in the future? I know it's been a major question in the media.
Through the chair, something we can take back. I'm sharing kind of what I know and the authorities that have been granted to us by both levels of government, but it's something we can take back. However, I would also encourage governments accessible in terms of being able to ask questions directly to them, but we will definitely play that connector role and take that feedback back and see if there's any answers we can provide further to that.
Thank you.
Just a really quick point of privilege.
Sure.
To, if it's okay, to say that if you could really speak into the microphone, because I couldn't hear the questions that you were asking, Carl, because you were turned around asking them to the people behind you. If you could speak in the microphone in the future, that'd be really helpful, because I missed those. Thanks.
Thank you. It's an awkward side of the chamber to sit on when the folks you're speaking to, your back is facing. So I can appreciate the natural desire to turn yourself around, but to Councillor Crutch's point, please do stay in the mic.
Definitely
Thank you
make sure I speak clearly into the microphone.
for that. We do have one more speaker on the list. Member Wilson, please.
Yes, through the chair. Thank you, everyone. Obviously, the disruption and the challenges along the actual corridor are immense, and people are dealing with that. But while we're talking to Metrolinx and while we're asking them to remember important things, I'd really like them to think in the public realm about off the corridor. In the Stony Creek, Ward 5, 10, we got 80,000 people there. You're going to want them to get on that on the Metrolinx route. I'm concerned, and I've brought it up before, that there hasn't been a lot of talk about the end station at Eastgate. I know that your job in the fourth pillar is to be a connector, so I guess I'm hoping you're connecting with the HSR and the GO, but that's going to be this huge hub now of HSR and Link. I saw their new routes. It's all very exciting. The GO is there. That's great, but I'm concerned we're going to have this massive traffic challenge at 20 and Centennial Parkway 20 with us old folks and King, and that I've also talked about the building there, and we talked about it having maybe some public space, but there's nothing that I've seen, nothing that I just don't want this big concrete massive. So my question, I get to the question, is has there been any work talks, meetings on that end stage on Eastgate and all the challenges of the transportation hub that's going to end there? Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you. So at Eastgate, there are multiple stakeholders actually that are engaged in terms of what that hub will look like. So as Metrolinx and the LRT project, we look at the LRT stop, but we're fully integrated with HSR and the city and the developer in terms of having conversations of how all of those pieces fit together. I won't speak specifically into what plans HSR has. However, we do work with HSR and the developer to make sure that the seamless transfers between HSR and LRT are there, to make sure that we're integrating with the overall development application and the plans for the area. And really that goes along the entire corridor, not only at the terminus for Eastgate. Actually, we have HSR staff who sit in our Hamilton LRT office working with us on a daily basis in terms of how we're doing that integration, as well as all of the development along the corridor. We receive all of the development applications and work with developers in terms of how we integrate there. Maybe I can hand it over to Director Sheikh if there's any commentary on the HSR component.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Daniel. So as Daniel already mentioned, that we do collaboratively work with Metrolinx. We do have a dedicated HSR staff, and there are lots of discussion on that Eastgate, working with the developer and working with HSR and working with Metrolinx, how the best design is going to look like. But again, we are looking forward to the Alliance team when they are on board, and then when they progress from 5% to 30% and 60%, those discussions will continue to evolve, and then we will bring the appropriate information as required to the LRT subcommittee.
Thank you, everyone. If I could just wrap up by asking that Stony Creek Chamber be involved in some of those Eastgate discussions and let me know how I may partake of those, that would be great.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so definitely, yeah. So I have a communication officer here, so we will include you in our list when we are discussing the Eastgate terminals.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further speakers on the list. So at this point, if I could get a mover and seconder to please put the receipt of the presentation on the floor. Thank you, Councillor Crutch, seconded by Councillor Huang. And it is a show of hands vote. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. The next thing we need to do is have a mover and seconder to receive the correspondence related to the presentation. It's a correspondence from Scott Page respecting Hamilton LRT project update by Metrolinx, item 7.1. If I could get a mover and seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Crutch. All those in favor? Show hands vote. Any opposed? Nope, that carries as well. Thank you again for joining us today, and look forward to having you here again next year. Next up, we have 7.2 PED 2511A, Hamilton LRT Transit Municipal Betterment Process Update. This item also includes a presentation, so I'll ask our staff to provide the overview and introductions. And if anybody's wondering, I decided to take my question offline. So thanks.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. My name is Abdul Sheikh, Director, Hamilton LRT Project Office with City of Hamilton. And I would like to provide a brief introduction to the report for information, Hamilton Light Rail Transit Municipal Betterment Process Update that is before you today, ahead of staff presenting the details. This is our second report on this topic. The first report was brought to the LRT subcommittee on April 11th, 2025, where staff outlined the municipal betterment process, including key touch points with LRT subcommittee and council for approvals. The report before you today provides an update on that process, including the potential betterment candidates currently under review, and outlines the next steps in the process as well. So this work has been led by Farhad Shala, who is our manager of LRT Technical Services and Approval Coordination within LRT Project Office. Farhad will now walk you through the presentation and provides an overview of the report's content. And following the presentation, we would be pleased to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Sheikh. Good afternoon, members of City of Hamilton's LRT Subcommittee. My name is Farhad Shala, Manager of Technical Services and Permits Coordination with City of Hamilton's LRT Project Office. Today's presentation builds on staff's first report on municipal betterment process presented in April 2025. The presentation will shed light on staff progress to date, advancing through the municipal betterment process for the LRT project, lists out preliminary municipal betterment candidates, which could become confirmed municipal betterments, and the next steps in the process. As a reminder, per the 2021 Tri-Party Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, Metrolinx will construct municipal infrastructure respecting the project's basic scope following municipal standards and guidelines on a like-to-like basis, unless as agreed upon on the earlier project requirements and per compliance adhering to city, provincial, and federal laws. Above and beyond project's basis scope are municipal betterments, either enhancements to the basis scope or additions, which will require partial or full city financial contribution. From a budgetary perspective, 2 accounts have been established, each with approximately $10 million anticipated to support municipal betterments, either public realm improvements or city-initiated subsurface priorities. Staff showed this 9-step municipal betterment process map first in April 2025, summarizing key milestones required to advance, finalize, and implement municipal betterments into the LRT project. Steps 2, 3, and 4 have progressed since April, and we are here today to report on updates and next steps moving to step 5. Step 1 was fulfilled at the April 2025 LRT subcommittee, where staff identified key requirements and betterment process, defined roles of the LRT subcommittee and council, and presented draft evaluation approach for feedback. Step 2 is confirming the project's basis scope that is a Metrolinx responsibility to fully fund. This is an ongoing step. Back in May, Metrolinx released an updated conceptual design for Hamilton LRT project. The city responded to this updated design in October 2025 through a report to this LRT subcommittee providing preliminary comments informing the city's interests in the project's basis scope. The city and Metrolinx are currently working collaboratively to address city comments, and this will further continue as part of the development phase in early 2026. In step 3, LRT Project Office has been engaged in substantial effort canvassing a preliminary list of betterment candidates which could be included as part of LRT project. This list has emerged to reaching out to all city service areas, requests from key stakeholders, and council directions. The list in Table 1 detailed in Appendix A includes items for which their status and scope are slightly more advanced, and updated commentary is available from Metrolinx and city staff. It's important to note that this list is not an exhaustive list of potential betterments, nor every item on the list is yet a confirmed municipal betterment. The city and Metrolinx have been working and will continue working collaboratively through all inquiries received from the council and key stakeholders, triaging through every item to determine their best course of action, such as implementing as part of the LRT project, implementation post-LRT construction, or a betterment funded by the city. Step 4 specifically includes initial analysis of some of the items as detailed in Appendix A, which includes comments from Metrolinx and city staff. I would like to highlight that this phase of investigation and analysis will incur no cost to the city. The preliminary list of municipal betterment candidates in Table 1, elaborated in Appendix A, generally ranges on key themes such as cycling and active transportation infrastructure, local transit, passenger experience, wayfinding and tourism, public realm and streetscape, and future-proofing for municipal infrastructure to enable installations post-LRT construction. Some of the future-proofing initiatives identified include new concrete paths and empty conduits for future power connections to new bike share hub locations, new concrete paths for HSR shelters, and city's communication network along the corridor. Public realm and streetscape items include streetscape continuity between the municipal right-of-way and the building face, enhanced public realm for downtown Hamilton, and enhance the streetscape along side streets connecting to the LRT corridor. Features to support passenger experience and enhance transit journey can include wayfinding signage and supplementary stop announcements and stop arrival. To further promote active transportation, infrastructure such as bike storage facilities and secure parking are also in the mix. The finalization and advancement of these initiatives are subject to a robust and comprehensive evaluation framework and Metrolinx approval, which will be further elaborated in future reports to this LRT subcommittee. The next steps in the process include advancing basis scope resolutions and triaging, working with Metrolinx and city service areas. As part of the next steps, a report to GIC is also inquired, which would be our step number 5, to seek delegated authority to allocate some funds from the 2 approved budgets to further study and investigate selected candidates with Metrolinx as required, authorize use of such funds, and also obtain approval of the approach to evaluate betterment candidates. At this point, I'm going to pause and I'm going to go back to my seat, and if there are any questions or comments, you're more than welcome to provide. Thank you.
Thank you for that overview, Manager, and we'll definitely wait for you to get to your seat. Speakers list, currently do have Councillor Huang, but if we could just wait until Manager's at his desk.
Now that he's seated, can I ask the question now?
Do it.
Thank you, Manager, for your presentation. Mine is just again, another clarification kind of question. We heard that there are 4 proponents. That step hasn't been determined yet because that step also includes how they're going to do the base and the scope. We're asking to work with them and the alliance. So how does it actually work if we want to do betterments? Because feasibly, wouldn't it make sense for us to do the betterments at the same time as when the construction is happening? Or do we expect to go in after the fact to do it? So how does, just help me with my step 1 versus step 2.
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor Wang, I will start and then I'll request Metrolinx to feed in. So the design progression you will see in Alliance development right now is 5%. Is going to go to, as per city standard, 30%, 60%, 90%, and issued for construction package, right? So what Metrolinx is asking that, we need to, because while they will be having an alliance partner on board early next year, right? Then they will be confirming the basic scope. Their aim is to find out what the additional items are required during the 30% design, right? Because once the design starts, it cannot go back, right? Because, that's a design progression. They wanted to understand, what the basic scope they are including in the package and what the betterment candidates are so that they can create a one unified package for 60%, for example, so that we can see, yes, that's a complete package, right? So that's how the design, and there are all of these items also depending upon other design elements. So all of these things needs to be well coordinated with the designer, which is alliance partner when they are on board, right? So that's the reason we are expediting these informations. Once the alliance partner is on board, we'll be discussing the basis score of confirmation, and we will also be adding these betterments so that they can create those further advancement to the design. So I don't know, Daniel, you may want to add something.
Through the chair, thank you, Director Sheikh. So we provide the base scope to our partner as the base by which we grow the design from. Anything that is differing from base scope that we provide requires discussion and agreement in terms of incorporating it into that base scope. For clarity, when the contract is signed early in the new year, they will be starting from the agreed upon base scope that is defined under the Memorandum of Understanding. The terms of what base scope means is in that MOU between Metrolinx, the city, and MTO. And then in terms of the process, the timing urgency from the Metrolinx perspective is really for the elements that will be fully integrated into the design. So in some cases, some of the assets, let's take telecommunications conduit, for example. We're going to have the road open. To go back in and do that later or to do the design later would require rework. So those are the types of things we need to know if they are to be incorporated into the project. We need to know a little bit earlier so that we can incorporate it into the design progression. There are other items that may be a little bit more standalone, like public art adjacent to the corridor. That can happen afterwards in different ways. So really, I would say whatever the betterment decision is, the timing criticality is dependent on what the betterment is. And then there is a process, there's an agreement flowing down from the MOU we have between Metrolinx and the city on the municipal infrastructure agreement, which goes through the process by which we agree to incorporate that scope into the project.
Okay, thank you for that. So is there like a drop dead date as to when we might be, where we might have to put betterments in? Because this is a first sort of preliminary look. It's already got a lot on here, but as we are going through some of the processes, and then maybe once we see drawings and once we start to see what that base scope really looks like and start to wrap our heads around adding in the betterments, what if we change our, or think of something different? So is there a point of no return at some point?
Through the chair. So how the process works is there's a form that's submitted to Metrolinx for review in terms of how we incorporate that betterment in. There's no drop dead date. However, what I would say is, again, depending on the asset, one of the things we do in our evaluation of the request for the betterment is what does it do in terms of redesign or rework or overall implications for our overall schedule. Those are some of the lenses we use to evaluate the betterment request. So I would say the earlier in the development phase, the higher the chance we're able to incorporate it because we haven't gone too far down the path. With that said, there's not a drop dead date. There's always the opportunity to provide the request. It's just how we evaluate it and our ability to incorporate it may change over time.
Okay. I think my last question is probably towards manager or Director Sheikh. How do we incorporate buying local, buying Canadian? How do we incorporate some of the community benefits that Carl's talked about in the past, social procurement? How does that kind of work with all of the betterment stuff?
Through you, Madam Chair, 'cause, this is really a great question. So what you see is all about the physical infrastructure, which needs to be incorporated into the design, right? But in parallel, we are working with Economic Development Office to work on, as you mentioned, even the local businesses and others. So there is another report which we presented where we actually taking all of these opportunities. But the list, what you see here is basically the physical infrastructure, which will be included as part of the capital construction of the project, right? But there are lots of other works which we will continue to work with other service areas on that part.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Anybody else on the committee? Yeah. Member Springer, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's more of a comment. When we do get to the stage of starting to finalize some of these community benefits, I wonder if we couldn't consider if there's items that could be executed before we're at the final stages so that the community could benefit from them while they're going through the pain of construction. That's all.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, we will be working closely with Metrolinx and then Alliance Partner, and we will come up with a communication strategy, how we will be rolling those information going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other committee members have a question on this one? Yeah. Member Craven.
So it's my first meeting, so it's entirely possible I don't understand something here. On the list, so I'm just trying to understand how the base of what is required and the language around betterments in that relation. So for example, I'm just looking at one of the options on the list of betterments includes audio and visual arrival at stop announcements. And that to me seems like it would be more of a baseline requirement for accessibility. And thinking about issues around lighting might be baseline requirements around safety and accessibility. So I'm just kind of wondering how some of the city's priorities around creating public safety in public spaces and also the requirements around accessibility from AODA and others, how those fit into some of these, like the difference between betterments and like what the base should be.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you very much for the question. I will provide some response and I will let Metrolinx to tag along if needed. That particular item is a supplementary announcement that the staff are requesting to include. Metrolinx, I'm sure they will have their own generic announcements as trains are approaching a particular stop. So the item that you saw on the list would be now arriving at a particular station or a destination of importance. So it would be not only the stop location, but also additional statements which would provide additional information what the key areas are the train is arriving. So it's there. It's something that we received from our tourism group as an item to include. There are protocols and procedures that Metrolinx has, like in terms of language requirements, English and French, and how much can be provided from a accessibility perspective. But that particular item is received. We are looking at it. We just had to project it and show that with everyone with all the comments provided to it.
Thank you, Manager. So is that clear? Member, okay, great. Anyone else have questions on the Betterment report? Nope. Okay, great. So we will now move to receive it. If I could please get a mover and seconder for both the presentation as well as the report on the floor. Thank you, Councillor Kassar, seconded by Councillor Huang. Again, it is a show of hands vote, so all in favor, please indicate. Any opposed? Seeing none, that carries. Thank you. Just to confirm, Councillor Francis is no longer in the meeting? Correct. Okay, thank you. On to 7.3, integrating social... Oh, the mayor has her hand up. Okay. Sorry, Mayor, was this on the last one? That we've just, oh, it's a vote up. Got it. Thank you. So that carries. 7.3, integrating social procurement into city-led LRT Early Works. If I could please first get a mover and seconder to put the report on the floor. Thank you, Councillor Huang, second by Councillor Kassar. Any discussion on item 7.3? Member Andrus, thank you. Anybody else, please begin indicating to the clerks.
Hopefully you can hear me now, Cameron. Good. All right. Yes, I'm really concerned about why this item is being delivered to the LRT subcommittee and not back to the Community Benefits Protocol Committee where it was originally initiated, and two, why city staff was unable with Metrolinx's leadership to actually deliver on the community benefits portion of this project, if staff could answer.
Through you, Madam Chair, my name is Abdul Sheikh, Director, LRT Project Office. So, Member Andrews, this came from the motion from that another committee, and then another committee did include that the resolution of that motion could be provided to any relevant committee, right? So that's the reason, because I thought LRT subcommittee is more appropriate and it's a timely, and we are actually starting another early works project. So that's the reason, and a timely purposes, we are bringing this one, and this aligns with the motion what we have from that committee as well. But in terms of, there was another question, Carl Andrews, if you don't mind.
Yes, around how the city was not able to deliver on the promise of community benefits from that particular motion.
And through you, Madam Chair, so what I understood, the motion what we have is basically looking at what city could do, working with Metrolinx, implementing some of the social, community benefit into the early works project, right? So city staff, especially procurement, director is here, and so they can provide further input. But they did discuss with Metrolinx, and that's a resolution in a timely manner which we could implement, because we do have only one outstanding early works project, and we have to proceed with that construction in early 2026. But I can probably request Director, Tina, if she can provide further input on that part.
Through the chair, Tina Ayako, Director of Procurement. In order to follow through with the direction of the Community Benefits Protocol Subcommittee, we did a jurisdictional scan of a few municipalities, and including Metrolinx had some discussions. And as you know, staff is in the process of developing the framework for community benefits. And so because that framework is going on, this project would be going in parallel. Ideally, it would have been that the framework goes ahead and we have the plan, and then we would, through that framework, engage with the external outreach community partners and try to build up those relationships and find opportunities for staffing and resourcing and the social value. But it's not ideal. So we were trying to do the best with what we had at hand. And through the consultations that we did with the municipalities, we decided to move with the Peterborough model, which is sort of a quieter, softer launch, if you will, more so for information gathering at this time. Because again, we wanted to be successful. And if we went with a full-blown requirement on the GCs to have training opportunities and all that employment opportunities geared towards social procurement, it might not be successful at this time without having that full framework on the other side completed.
Thank you very much for that answer. Through the chair, I'm just also want to note that there was several social value procurements already done with the city back in 2017, and I thought perhaps given that and Metrolinx's experience that there might be an opportunity for us to learn from that on this contract opportunity.
So through the chair, the pilots that were undertaken in 2018 and 2019 were not in any way related to a linear contract or a linear construction. They were more so on consultants. And that whole industry, at the time when we did pilots, it was the thought of social procurement in construction was in its infancy. I'm hoping that that understanding is different now. And so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to move forward social value procurement in linear construction when we're done with the framework.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers on the speakers list, did I get a mover and seconder? Yes, it is before committee now to vote. Also, again, show of hands. Those in favor? Any opposed? And the mayor's indicated. Thumbs up. And that carries. Notices of motion. Are there any committee members? Great. Only because I didn't miss anything. That's what I mean. Otherwise, I welcome them at all times as your chair, please. So seeing that there's no further business on our agenda, I declare our meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for preparation for today's meeting.